Do they play baseball then too, or?
They love every sport. So,
Good.
yeah, it's fun.
Was that just something that came natural to them when they were younger? I mean, like, did you have to sit them down and say, all right, now we're going to teach you about baseball, or now we're going to teach you about football, or something like that?
No. They just loved it. And my kids would have wanted to watch football over cartoons.
Really?
Which I thought was really interesting. And that wasn't really coming from me.
Yeah.
My dad was a coach. So
he was a football coach?
Well, he coached some football, but he coached baseball and basketball specifically. He did a lot of that, and the boys just love it. And I was competitive, and I was good at basketball, but I was easy to let it go. But they're not.
They're not.
No.
You grew up in North Dakota then, or?
No, I grew up in central Minnesota, Wilmer.
Oh, Wilmer, that's right.
But I have family in North Dakota.
Okay. And did you play like varsity baseball and football at Wilmer then, or?
Basketball, I did.
Basketball.
I played football in 9th grade, but I did not really like football.
Okay.
I had the size, but
I
didn't really care for it. But my parents said if I went out for it, I had to
finish the year.
We're not going to raise a quitter.
Right.
And, So I tried to cry to my mom, and I hated it. It didn't work, but I did that the whole.
So you stuck it out.
I did.
Yeah.
I did. Probably one of my best life lessons.
I was going to ask you. Yeah. So do you feel like you took something from that, or?
Absolutely. You become your parents too as you get older.
Sure.
But, just teaching my kids, like, I want them to strive for excellence in everything that they do.
Yeah.
But I will not. I tell them I will not raise quitters.
You tell them the same thing?
I tell them.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And they have to push through and be their best always. And if they're going to do something, they have to commit to it.
Right. So just try hard and finish what you started, basically. Yeah.
Do your best. You don't have to be the best, but you have to do your best.
The effort has to be there.
Effort. Yep.
Yeah. And you played varsity basketball then.
I did.
Which you enjoyed that.
Yeah. And I actually I quit my senior year. But it just wasn't. I decided to go out for the musical, and my friends kind of laughed at me, and I said I was going to get the lead in the musical. My mom was a music teacher.
No way. Yeah.
Growing up, I was good at singing. My friends didn't necessarily sing, so that wasn't my friend crowd.
Yeah.
But I would do a lot of music, singing and whatnot, and I would do very well. I typically.
So what musical was it?
It was Oklahoma.
That's a great one. Yeah.
So it was Curly in Oklahoma.
Is that the lead?
That was the lead, yeah.
Have you done any musical acting since then?
No.
Okay.
No.
Well, we have a group here in town that does the musical every year.
Yeah.
And has anybody tried to recruit you?
Years ago when they were doing Oklahoma. But, I was always known for singing for years. And I moved to Park Rapids, and that was one area that I just... It faded away a little bit, and I sing at church, but I just don't sing as much as I used to.
Yeah. But singing at church is a good thing too, I
Absolutely.
suppose, right?
Yeah.
And so you're now I want to get the title right. You're the youth director at Calvary.
Yeah, I'm director of youth and education, and I'm also a SAM, so synodically authorized minister as well.
Yep.
So basically, to kind of simplify that. I can do most of the things that a pastor can do. So one way that my ministry at Calvary has gotten really rich is I've been at Calvary for 19 years.
Yeah.
So I have done a lot of marriages. I've been doing a lot of weddings of youth group kids, youth group couples, which is really a neat thing.
Oh, yeah.
Baptisms, and I preach about.
So kids that you had in your youth group got married, and then you did the wedding?
I've had two couples that I can't say they met. I mean, Park Rapids is small, so
sure.
I can't say that it was. But there was a spark in youth group, so there's been two of them now that I've done. So that's kind of neat.
One of the women who works here, her mother, she went to St. John's, but it was interesting because she got baptized there, she got confirmed there, she got married there, and then her funeral was there, all in the same church. So I assume that if you stay there long enough,
That has never been my plan, but
maybe not the funeral part, but because you'd hope that a person that you baptized would not die before you. But
Absolutely.
It's got to be kind of neat just to see these, the youth develop from very early age. I mean, at the time of, say, baptism or something like that,
Absolutely.
all the way up to the point where they're getting married. I mean, my goodness, right?
Getting married and then also baptizing some of their kids.
And then,
So it's really neat in that in the sense of wholeness, and the kids feel. I can't say they're kids; they're adults now, but I always see them as kids. But it is really neat to see how they grow up and how they continue to keep Christ the center of their lives. Yeah. And that's one thing in youth group. I really do strive to get that rich, deep relationship, make faith really applicable and to their everyday lives. Yeah. We go on mission trips, and we do a good job creating a community where they feel a sense of belonging, where the foundation is on Christ. Yeah. And so it's really fun for me to see them continue to thrive in life, and when they go off to school, to get involved in a church, then get married and find a church of their own. So I continue to ask them those questions. Are you going to church? Are you doing those things?
Follow up and make sure.
It's really neat.
So what's the youngest age that somebody would get into, like, say, Sunday school then?
Well, Sunday school we have at Calvary, they start at 3 years old. And then that goes all the way. They do have adult Sunday school as well. Mm-hmm. And I have a junior league on Wednesday nights, which is grades 6 through 8. And then also our senior league, which is 9 through 12. Yeah. And breakfast club is 9 through 12. So that's a Sunday school as well. Okay. So we do see a lot more, churches nowadays. We see a lot of kids on Wednesdays that typically we don't see as much on Sunday mornings. So my philosophy and my passion area for growth is continue to try to bring those families in to be that sense of leadership for their kids and to try to get them to come into worship. Because the amount of kids that we have on Wednesdays is large. Yeah. And then on Sundays, I mean, it's still a good number, but it's not nearly what it is on a typical Wednesday night.
Yeah, and I mean, and it is a really good way to get a family involved by starting with the children. Most people would think intuitively you would get a family involved by getting involved with the mother and the father, whatever the situation may be, and then they would bring the kids. But actually, it can work the other way, and maybe it works the other way more often than...
You see in the younger years, like the Sunday school years with younger kids, you see the parents, especially in the Lutheran church, a lot of the parents start coming back to the faith. They want to make sure their kids have that solid foundation. But when it comes to youth groups specifically, it's kind of a place that kids want to come, and it becomes their community. Yeah. And then from there, we tend to pull the parents in even more. So that's a really interesting concept, but that's something that we're continuing to try to... because the number one influence on a kid's life, and you can't change it in humans, is parents. Number one.
Has to be.
And statistics and data support that. So the more that we can get parents to take the lead, the stronger our kids are going to be in their faith and keep that faith walk.
And you mean, you got such an interesting perspective because you're involved with the schools as well to see but that statement right there that, it's got to start with the parents, the children being raised correctly and everything like that. The most important part of that is the parents, right?
Yeah. I think a lot. I do say that the solid foundation is Christ. Right. But the influence a church can have is great. Right. But the influence of a solid parent that loves and encourages their kids constantly and points them towards Jesus. And even if you look at data and statistics too, the influence of a parent, but the influence of a father going to church with their kids is big. It's actually huge, and it's jaw-dropping. If a dad goes to church, how much the statistics are in like the 90s of kids continuing to go to church in their later years.
Really? Oh, I guess that's because the father sets the tone for the family in some ways, I suppose, and that's a big one, right? To take them to church. So you talk about the Christ being the center, and when the kids start Sunday school and they're 3 years old. When do you start seeing like the lights come on that, and when do you start really kind of giving them the gospel and all that stuff? Is that sort of a gradual process, or is that part? Is it just? I mean, something that could come up in an opportune moment, or what?
No,
What's your approach to that?
It can be very different for all kids, obviously, but Sunday school years, I think what's really important is kind of teaching them the basics of the Sunday school stories, and one thing I really strive to do, even with my own boys specifically, is like teaching them Daniel in the lion's den, but why do we want to be like Daniel?
Right.
Or why do we want to be like David and Goliath?
Sure.
You know what I mean? Those
simple, in most ways, right? We don't want to be like David in all ways.
But when kids are thinking about the story.
Yeah, because you're not teaching them, you're teaching about David and Goliath. You're not teaching them about David and Bathsheba, right?
Yeah. Exactly. But learning those fundamental Bible stories.
Yeah.
So when they do go out into the world, they do go out into the wilderness, they do go to school or wherever they go, that if they do find themselves falling away a little bit, maybe we can pull them back. I do find that the huge faith growth for our kids and the gospel really coming to heart, the confirmation years for our youth.
Okay.
Also huge impact for our youth, specifically at Calvary, mission trips.
Yeah.
It's amazing to see the faith growth.
Yeah.
And just see the faith come alive and change hearts in the sense of all of a sudden they have a servant heart.
Sure.
All of a sudden God spoke to them in a mighty way.
Yeah.
And as a youth leader, what's really interesting to me is I can't tell you who that's going to be. Every year we go on a mission. We go on a mission trip, and I know who our leaders are, but there's always a few kids that it's just like. It comes alive.
The lights go on.
Their faith just comes alive, and it just makes sense, and they're just on fire.
Yeah.
And I never know who that's going to be, but God works in mysterious ways.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. So, like, what is the relationship between sort of a person, coming to know Christ, accepting that Christ died for our sins and everything like that, and then like the mission trip, like is it, what comes first, sort of like the chicken or the egg?
Well, I always say what's beautiful about our mission trips is we have the numbers. At Calvary, we're in a sweet spot. We have a lot of kids that are coming.
Yeah.
So they bring their friends. And that's a great thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of those kids really encourage their friends to go on the mission trips because it's a really good experience. It's fun.
Yeah.
But faith is just in your face.
Right.
Like the scriptures come alive. And we've been going with a group called Team Effort.
Oh.
And it's a mission organization, and they train their college-age youth to share their testimony. They train them on the gospel, so much so that that's just as important as the service part.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's hard to find. So the praise and worship and the devotions are just amazing, and they really do impact our kids.
Okay.
So I would say that sometimes the mission trips, people might say, well, why are they going to Florida?
Yeah.
Or why are they going to, when they could really go to, Monaga or,
Yeah, right.
Because a mission field.
Think globally, act locally,
Absolutely.
right? Yeah, the mission field's here. Sure.
Well, it's right here in our own community. This Park Rapids is actually my greatest mission field, and because I live here every day.
Right.
But, sometimes that wow factor to kids, because they experience it, all of a sudden their faith comes alive.
Right.
And I just think there's something really amazing about that. And sometimes some of the kids, when their faith comes alive, maybe they wouldn't have had that opportunity. Maybe that faith, it would have taken a lot longer.
Yeah.
To get to that point.
So I mean, in a sense, like they're on a mission trip, but really the ones who are being, most benefited by it are the kids themselves, right? And not necessarily the ones that they're. I mean, I know that everybody's benefiting.
Yeah, I think it's a both and, because we do work a lot with the people that we work for specifically, but I do think that through them sharing their stories, a lot of them are very strong Christians. So they will share their stories. They will share their struggles.
Yeah.
We've gone to places like Hollywood, California, where we have worked with people literally. I mean, you think of Hollywood, California as being rich and wealthy. I've taken.
Oh, no.
I think I've gone 3 times, and we've been right in
Run
part
down.
of Skid Row.
Yeah.
And you're talking not millions, but thousands of homeless people.
Yeah.
Sitting across the table, and for the. One of my favorite stories specifically is there was a a youth that was telling me how ridiculous his parents were because they were giving him this advice. And I was like, well, that's actually good advice. Well, on the plane ride home, he was telling me that he had this aha moment because this homeless gentleman that was really struggling with a lot was giving him all of this advice. And
it was the same advice?
It was the exact same advice. And I laughed and I shared with him. But what he said, but in that moment, I said, he doesn't want you to make the same mistakes as he did. And he said, he told me that. But it wasn't that aha moment until someone else was telling him. Someone that had experienced a much more difficult path because of some of his choices. So.
Why is it so hard for young people to take advice like that? I mean, because we all think, if I would have just known this and if I would have just known that, but most of those things, you were told those things, but you just didn't follow it. Like, saving a little bit of money in your 20s, it goes a long way when
Absolutely.
you're, or don't I don't know. I mean, you name it, right?
Yeah.
The kind of life advice that people don't take. What is it? Why do, I mean, in your experience, you deal with a lot of youth.
Yeah.
Why don't they want to take that advice?
Well, I think they're learning, they're growing.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's one right answer for that. Some kids are more difficult than others.
Yeah.
One thing I will say, though, when we go on mission trips, I don't know very many churches that do this, but no cell phones.
Really?
And, I've talked to other leaders of other groups, and they're like, how do you do that? And it's just something I've been very strict about. And what I hear from the kids that are constantly on those cell phones, they say, I loved it at the end of the week. To be free. And they feel a sense of being free from it.
Yeah.
But the impact and the influence that this has over their lives, over their stress, it is very, very interesting. But I will tell you, we take a group of 30 and not one cell phone. And it is humorous at times because we always do at least like one really fun event. And they're like, can I take a picture of your group? And they're like waiting for the kids and none of them have a cell phone.
Yeah.
But I really think that that's another option. That's another huge opportunity to help kids disconnect and also focus on Christ in their lives.
It was funny you mentioned that because as I was riding here this morning, I was listening to a podcast and the guy was saying that, oftentimes we treat technology as idols.
Absolutely.
And the the internet, the cell phone, and there was one other device and I can't remember what it was, but that, or those three things, as they became more prevalent in say the last 20 years, has really fundamentally changed us, I think. To such an incredible extent. Have you ever seen those pictures where they're like photographs where the person they're looking at a cell phone, but then they digitally remove the cell phone from the picture, and so everybody's just standing around and like at a dinner, and everybody's just like looking at their hands or something like that.
Absolutely.
I mean, and you've probably seen it over the years how kids before they had the cell phones up until the point that they do now. Like, what have you noticed about the change in just like, I don't know if you want to call it the psyche or whatever, just the way that kids are after the introduction or the prevalence of them having cell phones?
Well, I think they're more anxious than they've ever been. I do find as a parent too, our kids will not receive a cell phone until they're 16 years old.
I was going to ask you that.
And that is not the norm.
Right.
I will say.
What is the norm?
It's interesting. I don't know what the norm is, but I hear fourth graders. I have my kids have friends that are in third grade that even have them. Yeah. And as a dad, I get anxious even seeing my kids play on the iPad because I just want them to be outside playing with the ball.
Yeah, right.
I wanted them to be playing with blocks and cars and animals when they were younger.
You have 5 kids, right?
No, I have 4.
We have 4, okay.
But we had 4 boys in 5 years.
Right.
So it was probably easier for us. All of our boys, which is unique about them, they all love the same stuff.
Sure.
So like during COVID, they had a great memory. They have great memories because like we sent them outside with the ball. Yeah. Yeah. But I really get anxious about as a dad. That is one thing. If I could even take away like those iPads, sometimes I need to find a balance because they need to know how to work them. They need to know how to use them. They need to know how to live in the world but not be of the world. And I think what's scary about is when we were kids, especially me, the internet was new. It was, the dial-up internet. Yeah. But now if kids want to know something, boom, they can find anything out. Where if we wanted to know something, it was hard for us to find out. Yeah. And I think that's a very scary thing in our culture, in our world. There's great kids that have cell phones. Well, there's great families that give their kids cell phones. But I do think for me,
it's not a one-size-fits-all thing.
No. But I do think for Tia and myself, protecting our kids from not having those cell phones specifically right now in their lives is very important to us.
And it's not just like that they can learn facts. It's that, and I don't know about parental filters and all that stuff, but I mean, you want you may have heard about this subway fire. This man set a woman on fire on the subway and everything like that. And a kid hears about that. Okay, wow, that's terrible. I mean, just because it's in the newspaper or something like that, there's a description of what occurred. But now it's like, oh, I want to see it. So you can go on and you type it in a search bar, and the next thing you know, they're watching a woman being literally burned to death on a subway. How do you talk to your kids about the stuff like that's on the internet and to give them or how would you, I suppose, because you probably haven't got to the point where they have any of them have turned 16 yet, but I mean, how would you go about explaining to them what's there and what they could or shouldn't look at?
Well, my kids do have iPads, and we do have a home cell phone, so they do have one cell phone that they can occasionally text a friend or something like that. And we do have those conversations, pulling them aside. You talk about someone burning, but I worry about the sexually explicit stuff.
And that's all over the place too,
the language of music. I worry about those type of things. So I'm a common sense. Let's talk about the facts. Let's break it down right away. Age appropriate. So my 8th grader's gotten a lot more conversations. We've had a lot more conversations with him than the others.
Sure.
But we also watch how much TV our kids watch. And we don't let our kids just watch anything. We watch a lot of football. We watch a lot together.
Nothing wrong with that, right? No, except for the commercials, though.
Exactly. I mean, but we have conversations about all those things because, like I said, I want them to be able to live in the world, but not be of the world. So,
I mean, but I mean, it's just, it's hard to say, well, here's some of the things that you could look at. Because I almost feel like, if you have a conversation, you have to be very careful with it because you have to be like, well, here's all these things you could look at, and the first thing they're gonna be like, oh, I could look at that, and then
Well, I think that's true. Every parent and everyone is different. We our family just went to Utah, and we went we hiked a lot of amazing places, but our flight home was in Vegas, so we decided to take our kids, and we stayed near the Vegas Strip. So we decided to take them. We were going to be 8:00. We were in our rooms.
Sure.
But what we experienced was, it was good for us. It was a rich experience for us as parents to talk to our kids about things. Would I do it again? No. But
you walk up on the strip at night,
and it wasn't even that late. But they didn't see.
No.
But it was bad as far as I'm concerned, and it was sad. And we had lots of conversations, but we didn't dodge any of those conversations. We talked about addictions. We talked about drugs. We talked about alcohol. We talked about, people wearing hardly wearing any clothes. Prostitution. We talked about a lot of just the way that people were acting.
I mean, they call it Sin City for a reason, right?
And we talked about how sin can suck us in, and that is anyone. It doesn't exclude you or me. We can easily be sucked into those addictions, and I know that we have alcoholism and
we have all those things
genetics
right around here.
So in family genetics and friends, so that those kind of topics for us, they're not off we want to have those conversations with our kids, so they can
And I'm sure you got quite a few questions after you walk them in the street.
Oh, yeah. Big eyes and scared. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it is.
It would be. Yeah. Because you think it's just going to be lights and everything, but, Vegas is a dark place.
Well, and the lights suck us in, but the lights can bring a lot of darkness into our lives. So, like, even though it looks good, it doesn't mean that it is good.
Right. The whitewashed tomb, right? They say.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So you kind of touched on this before, but, as far as kids being involved, what is the importance, to a child or a family of being involved in a church in 2025? I mean, and because you kind of feel, you get the sense, at least from just observing American culture, that, fewer and fewer people are identifying as Christians. Fewer and fewer of those people are actually attending church and being involved in a church. What are the benefits to it?
Well, I think one of the benefits that people think of right away, the first thing that I think a lot of people say, is a sense of community. It's a place where they're loved. It's a place where they're encouraged. It's a place where they raise up not just one person, but the entire family.
Yeah.
I truly believe that when someone has Christ in their heart, you can see it. It changes them from the inside out. When we talk about the church is not a building. We can think of Calvary, Faith Bridge. We can think of First Baptist, but the church is really the people,
right.
So raising up the church, the people, to go out into the world, it changes people from the inside out. And that's really, I think, what we need to continue to do, to share the love of Jesus, share his truth, be in his word, and be transformed. And when we're transformed in this, God can do amazing things.
Right.
I always talk about the Holy Spirit working in and through you.
Right.
And I'm a firm believer, like, the Holy Spirit guides my life each and every day. If I would have chosen my path that I wanted, I would have been a teacher, then I would have become a principal, and I definitely wouldn't have lived in Park Rapids, even though I know now this is where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
I have a Christian ministry minor, but I never thought I would ever work in a church.
Right.
But God's plan has been very different. I never thought I would be in Park Rapids for 19 years.
Yeah.
But here I am in obedience to God's call. So it's just
it's
so
amazing, how that can
Yeah.
just work. I didn't think I'd be here either, but here I am. So absolutely. So now you're synodically authorized minister, which means that you're basically able to do most things that a pastor, a full pastor, could do. One of those things I would imagine would be preaching, right?
Yeah.
So how often do you preach, and what's your approach towards writing sermons and stuff like that?
I can preach anywhere from 50% to, now we have two synodically authorized ministers. So it's Pastor Steve and Liz and myself. So it can be twice a month. It can be once a month. But my focus, really, where my heart is in ministry, is really making the scriptures come alive. I want people to understand them, to be able to apply them to life, and simplify them for someone as ordinary as me, so I can understand them, and it can continue to stir within my heart throughout that week. I always ask the kids, what was my sermon about? And then they know I'm going to ask them. And if they can't tell me, I feel like I did something wrong. Because I want them to be able to apply it to their life. And I think that's probably my greatest gift, that life application. That's teaching. So using the Bible story, using the gospel, using the scripture, but also trying to bring it into
the application part of it.
And like that, may you go out into the world, may you, to try to inspire as well. That's really my strong suit.
And do you start with a verse and then come up with a sermon that's based on that verse, or is is that something that comes up on a calendar, like a verse comes up on a calendar and says you're going to preach on this, or where do you get your inspiration to start?
Well, typically there are Sundays of seasons. So we do follow that a lot. Sometimes they do change, and we can change them if we would like. I did do a sermon series this past summer, and we tried to do some different things, with, some contemporary things, and it was really a neat series. So we do have some ability to change things as well.
But it's kind of nice also to be told you're going to have to preach on this passage, and then just kind of use that as a starting point.
Yeah. Right? Very rarely do I feel like there's nothing. Like I don't read it and think, oh, there's nothing.
Yeah.
It's amazing how the Holy Spirit works.
Because it doesn't come back void, right?
No, exactly. And for me, how do I start getting my sermon ready? I will tell you that I really feel like the Holy Spirit speaks to me when I go for a run. I go for a run. If I can be struggling writing anything, if I go for a run, and if you see me running around town in the middle of the day, you think that guy never works. Yeah, I'm probably getting my sermon written. You know what I mean. And then I come back, and then all of a sudden, bam! I have the whole outline.
You have all
ready
these
to
thoughts.
go. I have. It's just crazy.
You ever you take voice notes or anything like that as you're doing it?
I don't have anything that's really great at that, but I do use my phone occasionally. But then it cuts me off, and then I have to do another one. Yeah. But I do it occasionally when something's really good.
Yeah. And then you just kind of just take it from there, from that idea. What do you like about preaching?
I've always, my strong suit is really working with youth. Yeah. And that's always been my cup filler at Calvary. But I really love bringing what I do with youth and bringing it to the adults as well. Yeah. And it's really strengthened my ministry and to help show me that I am capable of sharing the message and sharing God's love and truth with the adults as well. But I always have said that the youth, that is my strong suit. That is my passion. That is my cup filler in life. But I really do love sharing with families.
And I'm sure it's appreciated too. The feedback has got to be great, right? When you're doing it. So that's wonderful. And so you're doing that maybe once or twice. Do you when you do that, do you always do both services, or is it okay?
Yep. Then we do the Saturday. There's a Saturday night service, and then both services on Sunday. So it's just planning and organizing all of that.
Well, that's got to be fun too, to kind of keep things fresh, or sometimes if you're doing the same thing over and over again, doesn't matter what you're doing, it can get a little monotonous. So if you add that to the mix, and it kind of would add a little spice to your. And
I've been doing it for about 2.5 years now, but I do find that it's really helped me to grow as well, because it's helped me to dig into certain scripture that I've read, but maybe just didn't dig into it in depth.
I had that same experience too, because I've taught an adult Sunday school at First Baptist, and what I've found about it is that you've heard, it's kind of cliche to say that the best way to learn something is to teach it to somebody else, but I did that this last summer. I did a Bible study on the book of Philippians, and we went through every verse, and there's certain verses, of course, that everybody kind of knows and that stand out from that book, but when you put it all together, it's really just it's amazing. It's God's word, but it's not something that I say that I was really familiar with before I really started to do this. And teaching or preaching has a way of forcing you to become intimately familiar with the material, and that's a good thing, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you see, you feel that growth within yourself as well.
Yeah. So everybody benefits from that. So, all right. So I was going to ask you, you are also an elected member of the, was it school board?
School board. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And that's for the Park Rapids School District, or what?
District 309.
District.
So Park Rapids.
Minnesota, is it ISD 309?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So how long have you been serving on that board?
So I just got elected to my second term now. So I've been on for 4 years. So and that's been a learning curve for me. I feel like it's been a good experience for me, and I have a passion for education. I have a passion for kids. I'm in the thick of it right now. I'm vested because my kids are fully.
I've got 4
that are in. So it's been a really good experience for me, but it has been a learning curve. Working in the church, it's a different two different entities,
right? With different considerations.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what I find is like the church, we put a lot of feelings into it, like, well, that person's feeling that way, and how can we bring them in? There's a lot more feelings. Whereas a big change with like the school board and that it's like data, facts, statistics. Right. You're learning about a lot more. Yeah. So as strange as that might sound, that was for me. That was probably one of the biggest. Like, wow, I got to really shift gears here or put a different lens on. And I saw it through the lens of a parent. Yeah. Everyone has a different lens. The parents have a lens, community members have a lens, teachers have a lens, administrators have a lens. So you have to put on a different lens because you have to look at the whole district.
Right, well. Right. And you got to serve the constituents and all that. So what are the responsibilities of the school board?
Well, we all have our different areas. I am the clerk.
Okay.
And then there are certain areas. So I have like there's CTE, there's a board that I'm on that kind of that does a lot of it's a co-op and it's really neat in the sense of how it functions because it's the Lakes, I want to make sure, North Country Vocational Co-op and it's out of Bemidji. But what's really neat about that one specifically is a lot of that money is that they get through these grants is put back into the classrooms with like amazing machinery or amazing like doll babies that cry or the CTE equipment that can create out of steel or metal, they can do all of those kind of things, and it's giving our kids hands-on or auto mechanics, all of those kind of things. So, but what's so different about that one specifically is they're really getting the funds into the schools instead of it's not going towards the teachers' pay or anything like that. It's all going towards, and that's what's really been neat about that
because it's grant-based.
Right. Yeah. Also, I did put a note here because I'm world's best workforce. That is like setting goals for the district and making sure we're achieving them. If we're not, we need to figure out how to achieve those goals. It was called the world's best workforce. Now it's the CACR, Comprehensive Achievement and Civic Readiness. Okay. So that's the same thing. So I wanted to make sure I got that right. Yeah. And then just looking at some policies, and I'm also on the scholarships board. So we all have our own area. And, when you're a parent and you're vested in the community, people talk to you. So if there's anything, you just need to make sure you're not
concerns
with the concerns, but you need to also make sure that you're following the chain of command, obviously, that you're not in the middle of it. But also when you hear things or see things that you can have some conversations as well.
Sure. So how much autonomy does a local school board actually have? I mean, in terms of their operations, I know there's so much that goes into it, but like let's just say with curriculum, for instance, right? I mean, is there a sort of like a standardized curriculum that gets given to the district to implement, or does the district have any say in kind of how what's actually being taught?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the districts they have a group of teachers that get together to look at curriculum. So right now they're in the process of looking for a literacy curriculum as well as social studies. The state gives some input and what they would suggest. Okay. And so they go through
with
that.
Strings or without strings?
Sometimes there are some. Yeah. I mean, we look at it as a district. There are some things that absolutely not. That does not fit. It's not necessarily the right curriculum. But there has to be done. It's a great deal of research into finding that right curriculum. Yeah. Right now, our teachers, especially our middle school and elementary, they're really in the heart of this READ Act, and there's a lot of training right now. They don't have the curriculum, but the teachers have this training. So they're going through the training, and it's vigorous. And
the teachers are
okay. And then from there, then the next step is to get that reading curriculum. So they're looking at 3 different curriculums right now, and then they'll come back together and hopefully have a recommendation for the board.
The teachers will make that recommendation.
Well, the teachers, Jill Stevenson, she's our curriculum coordinator, so
Okay.
she kind of oversees that. Steph Marcel has some leadership in that as well. And then there's several teachers at several different grade levels that look at that, and they dig deep into it. They did math a couple years ago as well. So
and then they make recommendations.
They do make recommendations.
But the board must approve these.
The board must approve it. Yeah.
So is it the kind of thing where the board is given or does the board have to make a budget for the school district each and every year as well, or how do is that part of the annual cycle for the school district?
It's a little bit tricky because the state has a lot of what the state says they're going to there's projected.
Sure.
And Kent Fritzie is amazing in the sense of he does so much for our district, and he keeps us on track. But we don't always know what to expect. There are different funds there are some that are restricted, or they have to be spent in a certain way. And it seems as though some of those funds are getting they're more restricted all the time. So sometimes we don't qualify, so we have to be very careful. And that's one thing that as they get a little bit more restricted, as a board member, you have to have that different lens in the sense of we have to be careful on how we're continuing to move forward to make sure, because we don't necessarily know this year specifically, we don't know what the funding is going to 100% look like.
Sure.
And all the districts are in the same position.
So you probably consult with each other to a certain extent.
We do,
too.
but you have to step forward and make sure that you're feeling like you're making the best decision. And I think we are taking, we're moving forward, but we're not stepping. We're not going to the top of the staircase. We're taking those steps to make sure that we are accountable to the taxpayers. And I feel like we have a very good board. We have wonderful teachers. We have wonderful administration.
How many people are on the board?
We have 6 board members.
Okay.
And then so there's 6 of us.
And I mean, as far, there's this debate now about, do we need the Department of Education and all that stuff? And do local school districts ever receive funds directly from the federal government, or are they all pretty much like the federal government gives the funds to states, and then the states are kind of in charge of allocating those funds to the districts?
Yeah. So when looking at that, I haven't done as much. I need to do some more research on that as well. But if the federal government would get rid of those, it would go directly to the state, and the state would have all the mandates or what needs to be done.
Okay. So instead of the federal government.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So there needs to be a lot more, and there would be some concerns there. There would be some. I mean, there are.
Just like there would be for the difference between federal and
education.
state.
Right now, I think we have to look at the way that we're funding education, and that is, it's a concern with the way that we are funding education, because we're seeing all the costs continue to go up.
Yeah.
And then we get you even look at the bread costs. They go up I'm just gonna say it, they go up 10% or whatever, but then 2%. And that's not necessarily so. You're
talking about the results, right?
What they say overall, they're anticipating a 2% raise, and I'm not saying that, or 2% hike, and we're just looking at how our
the cost of living adjustment.
How are we going to continue to go up when everything continues to go up and up and up? So some of those things continue to be a concern that we have to keep our eyes on, and how are we going to advocate for better education.
Yeah, right. Okay. What about as far as Park Rapids athletics? Is that anything that the school district has any hand in terms of trying to, increase or develop the overall athletics program in the area? Or
well, it is a part. We do have a board member specifically that has a focus on that. But when it really comes down to the school board, I really think it comes down to the education of the students.
Okay.
The athletics, that's part of striving for excellence in everyday lives.
Sure.
But it really comes down to, as a board member specifically for me, though I want our kids to be involved in a lot of things, and it's good for kids to be involved in things.
Yeah.
Giving our kids the highest education is ultimately the most important. Yeah. The athletics are important too. They build character and integrity, but If my focus would be only on athletics, I would say, that's probably wrong, because you look at the data of any of these kids becoming professional athletes, the statistics are like 0.00065%, and that's not the correct one, but it's very low. But if we're not teaching perseverance, character, integrity, all of those skills through it, we're missing the point.
Yeah.
So
they say if you your best chance if you want to be a professional baseball player would be to go into catching.
Yep.
Because any of your boys catchers or
knees probably aren't good enough.
Okay.
None of them want to be a professional baseball player, but I've got one that thinks he's going to be a professional football player.
Yeah,
but we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, and just kind of getting back to parenting and stuff too. I mean, you said you want them to have a lot of different experiences, and just remembering what you said about how you were interested in both music and sports. Do you encourage that in your kids as well, to kind of do some like musical stuff too, as well as the athletics? Or?
I do. My mom was a music teacher, and my mom passed away. So when they were younger, I always made them sing and whatnot. I have tried, and Tia and I have tried everything, and music is not their heart.
They don't like it.
They're in it. They're in choir, and but it's just
nobody wants piano lessons. Nobody wants to sing.
No, and we have a piano, and Tia's tried to teach some piano lessons, but it's just it's not their passion, and that's one thing I found as a parent. Like, you can think you're gonna raise them and they're gonna like this and they're gonna do these things, but really they have a lot of things that they love, and you support them through it, and you guide them. You guide them.
Yeah. And I kind of look at you as an expert in parenting.
I don't know about that. Trust me, I'm not. No.
Well, I just take that comment for whatever it's worth. But what are some general nutrition tips that you might give to parents?
Oh, well, my wife's the expert, you're saying. I look at our family specifically. My wife she was a diabetes educator here for years in Park Rapids, and she worked for the bariatric department as well.
Oh, I didn't know that.
My wife is very much, now she's the district nurse here in Park Rapids, but she is very much in tune to wanting a healthy gut and eating healthy. Yeah. So in our house, you do not see a lot of I wanted Hamburger Helper more than anything for years, and my wife will not buy it. Nope. She wants
Fruit Loops?
No, not a lot of cereal. It's a lot of healthier foods, vegetables, a lot of fruit. Yeah. You wouldn't think that when you look at me, but you really think about just eating healthier. Yeah. A lot of organic. Yeah. I do think it makes kids healthier. Brain development. Sure. Eating the proper foods.
And you give them a good breakfast every morning before they go out to school. What does it usually consist of?
Eggs. Oh. We have eggs. We go through about 5 dozen eggs every week.
Really?
Which sounds crazy, but we have eggs.
Well, I suppose if everybody in your family had 2 eggs every day, that you're going through a dozen eggs a day.
Yeah. So we go through a lot of eggs. Yeah. They have a lot of protein. And making sure that they have good vitamins as well. Mm-hmm. And just making sure kids are healthy as a whole. Yeah.
And just because I'm going to try to get as much knowledge out of you as I can, you talked about screen time, limiting it, and all that stuff. Can you give me some details on that? What do you do for in terms of a time limit or anything like that?
We don't do a lot during the day. We don't do a lot of TV during the day. So in the morning when they wake up, it's kind of become our routine. You can watch a little bit of TV, not very long, but it's usually the recaps of football or previous years. Sure. And then at night as we're winding down. And even though people say it's not good for the sleep habits, for us it seems like they take their showers. After they take their showers.
Well, how are we going to watch Notre Dame against Penn State if we have to?
Exactly. But I will say we do make an exception for some of those big games as well. So screen time. But we like to get our kids outside. We like to do healthy stuff with them, and that's really one thing we've never really just let them sit inside,
yeah,
watch movie upon movie. Our kids don't really enjoy watching that many movies. It's too much sitting. Right. They want to be outside doing something active. Yeah. So,
what about video games? What's your approach towards those? No?
No, we have. I know.
The answer is no.
And I will tell you that we are one of the very few. And you know what's interesting is it's hard as a parent to say no, but because they connect with their friends now. You know, when we were kids, it was that Super Nintendo.
Yeah, you couldn't do it on the internet. Yeah.
Well, now they connect with their friends, so it can change friendships, and that can be hard.
Yeah.
But we do have a Super Nintendo, I think, and we have a Wii.
Even a Super Nintendo is something that came out in probably 2000.
Like it was mine, and it's probably yellow gray now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So our kids do not have any of that either.
Wow.
So.
And was there a time when they complained about it and then they just got over it?
They wanted it, but they knew that no, it was not going to happen.
Yeah. Do you find that your kids have good attention spans and everything like that too? Like, because so much would you see, like, I've seen a lot of times where parenting is like, give the 3-4-year-old an iPad and then they're just watching cartoons and all that stuff. And I gotta think that has a impact on their ability to focus.
Well, what I find with screen time, specifically with our boys, the more screen time that they had, the more emotions we would see. Oh. So they would become extremely emotional about silly things.
Yeah.
So I really just think our philosophy has always been less is more.
Yeah.
And what was your question again? It was going back
about attention span. Like, does the more screen time that they have affect their ability to focus on a task or something, for a longer period of time?
I don't know that I can say that. It might be an excuse, but I have boys.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
And they'll be focused on things if they like it.
Okay.
But if they don't, getting them to sit down and read a book that they're not going to enjoy is not something that they're going to have a very good attention span. So my kids are not perfect, but we will continue to guide them and hold that.
It's a work in progress.
Work in progress every day.
But they're so blessed to have you as a father and T as a mother. So
we love them unconditionally.
Well, Dana, Kocka, it's been really great having you on here, and I really appreciate you and what you do for this community, so thank you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.